Hello guys and welcome to episode 55 of the Beat Your Backlog podcast, a podcast discussing the things gamers like to put off, get to another day, and oh yes, will definitely beat later, their backlog. I'm your host Adam, and today we are heading back in time to the land of Hisui in Game Freak and Nintendo's Pokémon Legends Arceus. And for years now, Pokemon fans have been craving an open world Pokemon game. And I remember in the run up to the launch of Pokemon Sword and Shield way back in time, like when the Switch kind of first released, I think it was like 2018, fans were really hoping these games would be the Pokemon in quotation marks Breath of the Wild. And I don't think Game Freak quite hit that mark with those two games, even though they did introduce some open world aspects in like the open zone areas called the wild areas in that game, where people could wander around into different biomes and see different Pokemon moving freely there. But it was really just like a mini step in the right direction, in my opinion, for the Pokemon franchise, but wasn't quite what fans wanted. And then we skip forward to Pokemon Day 2021, which was nearly 4 years ago now, which is crazy. And Game Freak announced a new Pokemon spin-off, Pokemon Legends Arceus. The announcement seemed to have gone down well with fans. The game looked like the open world game we had all been hoping for, but personally I wasn't that impressed with how the game looked in the announcement video. The textures look really flat, the animations look very framey and kind of just very bad. And in addition, it was set in Generation 4 of Pokemon, which is the Diamond and Pearl generation, which is actually one of my least favourite generations of the series, so I wasn't that excited to jump back into the Sinnoh region. Still, there was over a year until the game released, or just under a year until the game would release, so things could only get better for the game. However, I still decided I would wait before playing it when it was released in January 2022. So then we skip forward again to 2024 and the announcement of Pokemon Legends ZA or Z2A or ZA or however you pronounce it, and my interest for Arceus peaked. I'd also really gotten into Pokemon over the last year or so, having played Scarlet and Pokemon White, and I'd heard numerous times from numerous people in the Beat Your Backlog Discord, and also like personally, like work colleagues and friends, telling me you should try out Arceus. It's one of the better games, or the better Pokemon games. And I thought, you know what, I probably should try it out so that I'm ready for Legends ZA releasing on the Nintendo Switch. Then let's find out if Pokemon Legends Arceus is the Pokemon Breath of the Wild that everyone was hoping for, and what does it do differently to the traditional games in the core Pokemon series. We will find out in this episode of the Beat Your Backlog podcast. But as always, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the podcast, I would like to remind you that you can support the podcast on Patreon. If you do, you will gain access to all of my content 24 hours early, and you will unlock the brand new Beat Your Backlog bonus vault, which has its very first episode. I put it in last week. It is my top 10 Nintendo games ever published on the Nintendo Switch. Really fun episode. I expected it to last about 25 minutes. I went on for over an hour. I think there'll be a few surprises in there that you might not expect. So if you're interested in listening to that, it is a Patreon exclusive. So you have to be a supporter on Patreon to listen to it. But you can do that by going to patreon.com/beatyourbacklog, or you can just click on the link in the description below. And I would also like to thank our first ever Patreon, Hoppel, who is supporting the podcast. Thank you very much. And if you decide, thank you for supporting too. So let's get on with the show. And the story starts off with you picking a character from one of the presets Game Freak provides. And I can't remember if this is the first game to do it in the series. I don't think it is, actually. But you get the basic presets where it's kind of like white male, black male, white female, black female, and a few races in between. And I don't really know how else to explain it, but that's what it's like. And it's just basically the same looking character. I can't remember actually. I think you can also choose your hair and kind of customize your character a little bit too. You choose your character and you start the game, and it's pretty obvious from the clothes that you're wearing and the fact that you have a smartphone that the current point in the game is set in modern times, and then for some reason it's not really explained, at least in the 25 hours I played, it's not really explained, but your character is chosen by a ray of light, which apparently the humans called Arceus, and you were told that you were needed to go and find all of the Pokemon to meet with Arceus once more. Your character is picked up by the ray of light, now in the shape of a Pokemon, and is sent in a whirlwind back in time. As you were caught in the whirlwind, Arceus sends a beam of light to your phone and turns it into the Arc phone, which will be a vital tool on your adventure. You awaken on a beach in a very Zelda fashion, which is aptly called Prelude Beach, and much like in Zelda, you have amnesia and have no idea who you are or where you came from. You're soon introduced to Professor Laverton, and from his dress of style, it is clear that you are no longer in Kansas. The professor is chasing around 3 mischievous Pokemon and asks for your help catching them, and when you do manage to catch him quite easily, he is amazed by your skill at catching Pokemon and takes you to Jubilife Village and introduces you to the Galaxy team there. And after some discussion with the Galaxy team leader, Commander Kamado, which is quite a hard thing to say, and his deputy Captain Celine, you learn that you are currently in the Hisui region in a time where Pokemon have yet to become the companions of humans. In this world, it is a place where Pokemon are dangerous and unpredictable creatures, but with the brand new invention of the Pokeball, the Galaxy team and their expedition force are slowly starting to tame them and make partners of the Pokemon of Hisui. The problem is they are not very good at actually catching the Pokemon with the Pokeballs, and that's where you come in. The captain enrolls you in the expedition force and sets you the task of going out to the region surrounding Jubilife Village to expand mankind's foothold on the Hisui region and learn more about the Pokemon of the area. Professor Laverton gives you his latest invention, the Pokédex, and one of the 3 pesky Pokemons he had trouble with at the very start of the game. After choosing your starter out of Cyndaquil, Oshawott, and Rowlet, and I ended up choosing Cyndaquil, obviously, you set off into the Hisui region on your adventure. And after kind of a tutorial period of learning how to catch the Pokemon and how the new Pokédex works, you return to Jubilife City and are introduced to Adamant and Irida, the leaders of the local clans of Hisui. Both leaders are at each other's necks over the understanding of the Great Sinnoh, or Sinnoh. I guess it's pronounced there. Sinnoh, Great Sinnoh, the deity of the region. And Adamant and his Diamond clan believe Great Sinnoh is the god of time, whereas Irida and her Pearl clan believe it is the god of space. Either way, the leaders have to calm their rivalry because they both have an issue that needs your help. A mysterious storm that is described as a rip in space and time, which I think is like the most Pokemon kind of like, oh, it's a storm. Oh, it's a rip in the space of time and time. It's like, how the hell do they know that? Like, you know, whatever. Anyway, stupid name for the storm in my opinion. It's basically appeared above the land, and lightning from the storm has zapped out and hit some of Hisui's noble Pokemon, which are Pokemon that are sort of semi-legendary, and they sort of hold like religious importance to the people of the region. And each clan has their own nobles. So the Diamond clan has ones that are special to them, and the Pearl clan has ones that are special to them. But doesn't matter which kind of nobles they are, each clans have been hit by this lightning and have been put into something called a frenzied state, meaning that they are way more aggressive and dangerous than usual. And Commander Komodo orders you to find the Warden of Cleaver, who is the Lord of the Woods, and is a person called Leon. So the Wardens are like basically the caretakers of these noble Pokemon. They give them sort of, what do you call it, like, not sacrifices, but tributes to them, like with food, and make sure they stay happy, make sure they stay protected. And the first one of Cleaver, he's called Liam, and you need to speak to him to see if he can think of any ways that you can calm Cleaver's frenzied state. However, after taming the beast with some calming sacks of food Cleaver likes, you find out that 5 of Hisui's nobles have been frenzied, and you must seek out each of the wardens of all 5 nobles and find out the reason behind the appearance of the strange cloud above the region. And this story is very different, I would say, to a traditional Pokemon story. And as I said before, Sinnoh is one of my least favorite regions in Pokemon history, so I wasn't that excited to be exploring it in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Saying that though, I do really, really like this story and the setting of Hisui in the game. It was interesting to see the origin of Sinnoh and even like the origin of where, you know, the Diamond part of Gen 4 came from, the Pearl part, and even Team Galaxy, who, you know, are the bad guys in Diamond and Pearl games. The rivalry between the 2 clans of Diamond and Pearl was really cool, and especially because they are both arguing over something and they both end up being wrong. Like, obviously, Great Sinnoh is actually Arceus, and it's kind of interesting as they slowly find this out in the story that they've both been wrong about their stuff, and their rivalry starts to cool and they start to become friends, which is nice to see. And furthermore, the idea of you helping settle this like new untamed region and sort of expand mankind's presence is a really interesting one. You start off with Jubilife Village, which in Gen 4 becomes Jubilife City. And it's kind of cool how they sort of show you the progress that you are giving, because the village slowly starts to kind of upgrade in a sense of like you see new buildings being built, you see new buildings are built. There's like a farming area where you can go and plant acorns, which you can use to make Pokeballs. You can expand this out as well. So it's kind of cool how you see the village kind of like this. It has this feeling of what, like, you know, this Western American frontier towns where it's all wooden buildings. Like a new one is popping up every day. More people are moving to the town. It becomes more kind of industrious, and it's cool that they actually put that into the game, because that's not something I would imagine Pokemon or the Pokemon Company or Game Freak doing, like thinking about. But it was like a nice touch that as you expand mankind's reach, that the village itself grows, which is really, really cool. And like with previous games in the series, Hisui is actually based off of a real Japanese region. So Kanto was based off of where is it in what's the island? But basically, Kanto is like the region around Tokyo, right? And then Johto, I think, is the region around Kyoto. And then I think Hoenn is based off of the southern island, but I can't remember its name. I think it's Honshu or Kyushu, whichever one it is. I think Honshu is the main island, right? And Kyushu is the southern one. So it's kind of cool that they, in Gen 4, they continued this trend, and they based Sinnoh off of Hokkaido, which is the very northern island. And it's also kind of cool how in this story they have kind of reflected the history of Hokkaido, which in real life was way more imperialistic. Like, I think Hokkaido was its own island with indigenous people for a long time, and then the Japanese like kind of samurai class went over and colonized it and turned it into Japanese. But the original story is a little bit more imperialistic than this one. But it's cool that the devs kind of based it loosely off the real history, and that also that your character's clothing, if you see the clothing that the main character's wearing, kind of the splash art, or when you very first start the game, it's based off of the clothing of the indigenous people of Hokkaido. People call it Ainu, and it's really like a cool kind of nod of the head to the history that actually happened there. And it's, for me especially, because I was a history student. Like, I studied history, I did my bachelor's in it, and I know a little bit about it because I went to Hokkaido a few years ago. It's kind of cool that they interwove this into it, and also like but somehow made it relevant to Pokemon. And I was impressed and how interested I was in how Sinnoh came to be, because Sinnoh is one of my least favorite regions. In addition, I appreciate the change in the plot from go out and beat the 8 gym badges to go out and heal the 5 nobles. To me, it makes the game feel much really like a Zelda game, actually, because you have each of these regions that you go to, and then in the middle of the region is the kind of the boss that you then have to go and fight and tame to then unlock the next region. Also, it does the typical thing in Zelda where you do the 5, like doing the 5 wardens, the 5 nobles isn't the end. It's like, oh, now you have to go and do 3 more things, and then you get to the end, like the end dungeon. So it felt way more like it has like a Zelda layout to me. And there aren't really dungeons in the game, but there are some kind of puzzle aspects that you have to do where it's like, okay, you have to remember the pattern here to unlock a door, things like that. Like it was very interesting and just very different to Pokemon, how Pokemon is usually set out, because Pokemon is usually set out beat the 8 gym leaders, go to the Pokemon League, and finished. Furthermore, the fight with the Frenzied Nobles is something completely new, and instead of going into just like a basic turn-based battle with them, you first have to calm them by throwing calming balms, which are basically just like sacks full of items the Pokemon likes, to calm them enough to then throw in your Pokemon and initiate a battle. And you do this by spamming ZR, which literally throws the bag of balm at them, and as it hits them, there is a health bar above them, or a frenzied bar, which slowly goes down. And there are like certain checkpoints on the bar where you can then throw your Pokemon in to do some damage, which will then also reduce the bar. It's kind of like it might seem quite easy, but as you are sort of trying to take your aim with these sacks, you are having to dodge the sort of bullet hellish and AoE attacks of the nobles. So there might be ones like fireballs shooting at you, or you can see on the floor like an AoE attack of lightning is going to hit there, and you have to sort of dodge out of the way by jumping, and at the same time try to throw these sacks to get the health down enough so that you can throw in your Pokemon. And it's interesting because it's kind of difficult because a lot of the battle arenas are quite small. And this entire battle system kind of caught me out of left field. Like, I didn't expect to see something like this in a Pokemon game. And yeah, it's they're hard. Like, arguably, the difficulty maybe comes from the small arenas. Also, the unresponsive camera controls, where a lot of the time you were like, where I can't even aim properly at the enemy Pokemon, because these Pokemon can be massive. So you can like, oh, where are they? And also the kind of small throwing arc of your character. So like the sacks don't go very far. So you have to get quite close to the Pokemon to actually hit them. Maybe these things make the game more challenging than it was meant to be. But it's definitely way more challenging than I expected from a Pokemon game. Like, usually in each fight I would die at least once, and it's kind of cool because it gives you the choice to be like, do you want to start the fight again from the beginning of the fight? Which I don't know why they did that, to be honest, because they also give you the choice to be like, oh, do you want to start from a checkpoint in the fight? And I obviously always went from the checkpoint. So yeah, you know, for me as someone who is older and understands how these kind of games work, I imagine, like, you know, for like an 8-year-old kid, these might be really challenging, which is quite interesting. And yeah, I think it's overall it's like a really refreshing change from the formula we've had for like the last 29 years. Furthermore, I really like the wardens that were kind of protecting the nobles, because I feel like they have way more character and they're much more interesting than most of the gym leaders we've had in the previous Pokemon games. You got to spend a little more time with each of them and get to know them a little bit more. And I think the designs of them are really cool. Like, if you see Leon, he's sort of like this child cowboy with like purplish hair. And if you ever played Game Freak's one of their other games called Little Town Hero, like, he really gives me like the same sort of vibes as the main character there. Then you have Calaba, who is like this old kind of ancient old lady, and she has like this giant leaf that comes out of her backpack and is like protecting her from the rain, because the area she's in is in like this kind of rainy, boggy area. And again, it was like, oh, this is like not like a Pokemon design. Like, this feels like a design of a character who should be in a Zelda game. Again, giving me those Zelda vibes. And the final one is Melly, who is very eccentric, has to be the center of attention, and is quite annoying, but again has a lot of character that you remember. And I think it really shows how good these characters are, is the fact that I can remember their names and remember their kind of personality traits, which with a lot of gym leaders in the other games, I can't really remember that. I think the only exception is in Pokemon White, where the gym leaders do play like quite a big role in the story. But other than that, yeah, apart from Gen 1, which most of the gym leaders I only know because of the anime I played and because I played those games so often, I can't really remember any of the other gym leaders in any of the other generations. And it's not just the story that's different in Pokemon Legends Arceus, but the gameplay loop too. The game is much more open than any previous game in the franchise, with you entering semi-open areas and actually seeing Pokemon wander around freely in those areas. So I think, like I said, with Sword and Shield, you had it in the wild area where you could see the Pokemon just kind of wandering around. But here, you don't get any random encounters. There's no like wandering into. I mean, there is wandering into long grass, but you don't trigger Pokemon battles that way. Instead, you use the long grass to sort of hide and stalk Pokemon who might be quick to try to escape. And yeah, this is because catching Pokemon now is done without really having to battle them. Instead, you can sneak up on a Pokemon, like you crouch down to sneak, and you get like a little kind of, if you've ever played like, I don't know, Skyrim, there's like a little eye symbol on top that shows you if the Pokemon has seen you or not. And if you sneak up to them and get into range, you can throw your Pokeball with ZR. And if you hit the Pokemon, it will get caught by the ball, and then you'll see some kind of bouncing animation of the Pokeball trying like as the Pokemon fights against the Pokeball. And if you manage to catch it, the ball will go still, and then you'll see this really like satisfying sounding and looking firework shoot up from the Pokeball, and there's like a firework crackle, and you know, okay, I've caught the Pokemon, which is it's really different, but I liked it. And catching Pokemon this way is great because to fill your Pokedex this time around, you will be catching like a lot of Pokemon. And gone are sort of the days of catching and or evolving like one of each type. Now to fill out the Pokedex page, you need to do numerous tasks to catch, for example, like X amount of that Pokemon, to see that Pokemon do X amount of attacks, see them, catch them in X amount of ways, so like from not being seen. It's way more of like a checklist to do rather than just catch it and move on to the next one. And it does feel like a to-do list, but what's cool is there are a lot of to-dos, but you don't have to do them all to fill out your Pokedex entry. So you have like, each Pokemon has like a research level, and depending on what you do with that Pokemon, that research level will grow. And when it gets to level 10, then the entry is complete for the Pokemon. So it might be that like with one Pokemon, you caught 10 of them, and they're like, okay, that's enough to fill out the Pokedex entry. The other one might be like, you've caught 2, but you caught them both from hiding, and then you battled them a few times, and that will also fill out the entry. So it's not like you have to catch 20 of the Pokemon and then see them do the move 20 times and then catch them from hiding another 20 times. Like, depending on what you do, it fills out the Pokedex entry quite quickly. And at the start of the game, I really actually enjoyed this change, mostly because the Pokemon are really easy to catch. So it's kind of like you were just running through, throwing Pokeballs. The Pokemon don't put up any resistance, you catch them straight away. And also at the beginning of the game, the regular Pokeballs are really cheap and easy to buy or easy to craft, because there is also crafting in this game, which we'll talk about a little bit later. However, the longer I played the game, the less fun I had actually catching the Pokemon this way. This is because some of the Pokemon actually get aggressive. So if they see you, they will attack you, or if they see you, they will try and run away. And once they go into this attack or run status, you can't catch them with the Pokeball like this anymore. You have to throw out your Pokemon and catch them in kind of the traditional way of, in a Pokemon battle where you get their health bar down to a small amount and then throw out the Pokeball. And I ended up mostly just using this means of catching them, because then they couldn't flee and they couldn't attack me. And also, like I said, at the end of the game, you have Great Balls and Ultra Balls, but they are quite expensive to buy and also quite expensive to craft. Like, the resources you need to craft them are quite rare or rarer. So it meant, like, if I was throwing Pokeballs and either missing, which can happen, or you throw them by mistake, sometimes the UI isn't the best to use. Like, you're kind of scrolling through it using a D-pad, and then if you accidentally press ZR to use something, it will just throw the Pokeball, even if there's not a Pokemon there. So you waste them quite often. And so I would much prefer just going into the battle and just catching the Pokemon that way, because then I knew, like, the Pokemon couldn't attack me, couldn't get away, and I wouldn't waste as many Ultra Balls or Great Balls. And I think I maybe went a bit overboard with this, because I was really worried when playing the game that you have this trainer level which levels up throughout as you complete more and more Pokedex entries. And then it's very clear from the very start there are 10 levels. And through the game, it kind of gates you off on what level you are. So it's like, okay, you need to, if you want to go to this new region, you should be level 6. And I thought, like, oh no, like, it's going to gate me off. Like, I'm not going to be able to finish the story unless I'm level 10. So I ended up, like, spending a lot of time catching Pokemon, trying to fill out the Pokedex entries, because I thought I wouldn't be able to finish the main story until I'd filled them in. But thankfully, that actually wasn't the case. I beat the game's main story whilst being on level 8 out of 10. So if you are starting up the game and this is a worry that you have, don't worry. You don't need to max out the levels, so you don't need to go and catch every single Pokemon. But I will say that actually, for most of the game, catching the Pokemon was quite fun, especially later on when you unlock some sort of move. Like, you can basically fly in the game later on, and you can use that to fly over the regions you've been to before. And there might be, like, just some small valley in the region where you obviously have never been to before, and there might be a new Pokemon there that you hadn't caught, and you're like, cool, all right, I'm gonna land here. There's like a spawn of the Pokemon. Like, I remember there was one area where I flew over and there was like this little pond, and on the other side of the pond there was Turtwig that spawned, and I hadn't seen a Turtwig. I hadn't seen any starter actually spawning wild in the game at all. So I basically landed there, hid in the grass, caught as many Turtwig as I could when they spawned, and then I kind of flew away so that they would despawn, and then flew back so they would respawn, and then I filled out my Turtwig Pokedex entry that way, which was quite cool. And going on to, like, the range of Pokemon in the Hisuian Pokedex, it was one of the kind of underwhelming things about this game, because I didn't think the Pokemon available were that interesting, and I assume it's because the Pokemon from this gen are from the Pokemon 4 Pokedex, which in my opinion is one of the weakest, or is probably the weakest Pokedex of all of them. However, I did really like the remix Pokemon and the Hisuian forms. So each of the starters has their final evolution is kind of remixed, and like I said, I chose Cyndaquil, so I ended up with a fire ghost type Typhlosion, which was pretty cool. It would have been cooler if I hadn't played Scarlet first and chosen Fuecoco, because his end evolution also is fire ghost. But it was kind of cool to see a remixed Typhlosion. And I also enjoyed the updates to Pokemon like Voltorb, Electrode, which I wondered how they were going to do it, because obviously those Pokemon are based on Pokeballs. And in this game, Pokeballs have just been invented, so it's like how will that work? But it's kind of cool how they explain it. And also Growlithe and Arcanine look awesome. Like they feel way more Japanese. Like just kind of like the lines that are used, and kind of their fur looks like, if you've ever seen like Japanese art, how they draw kind of wind sort of waves. Looks very, very cool there. And as well as the shake-up to the Pokédex, the battle system has some new levels of strategy and complexity added to it too. But to be honest, I do feel like they were a little bit undercooked. So what can happen now is Pokemon can master their moves, and when they do so, they can use a strong version of the move or an agile version of them. And basically using a strong version is almost like a glass cannon sort of strategy, where it lets you use the move and it does one really powerful version of the move. But it means that you are a lot slower than you were before. So it could be that the opponent's Pokemon might be able to attack you twice when you've only been able to attack once. And the agile attack is the complete opposite. It lets you do more attacks, so you move faster or you attack faster, but your attacks will do a lot less damage. And the reason I think that these kind of versions of the attacks feel a little bit undercooked is they reminded me a lot of the terastallizing attacks in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where I mostly forgot to use them throughout the game. A lot of that is because there isn't that many Pokemon battles in Legends Arceus. Like it's usually kind of tied to the story when you actually get into a Pokemon battle, and the only Pokemon in the game that can use or sort of opponent Pokemon that can use strong or agile attacks are other trainers Pokemon. There are sort of like mini boss Pokemon around the world where they'll wander around and they have these glowing red eyes, and they tend to be like, they look a lot bigger than a standard Pokemon, and they have their levels are a lot higher than the other Pokemon in the area. Those can use strong and agile attacks, and other than that, I think that's pretty much everything. So you don't come up across opponents that can use it that often, and yeah, that meant most of the time I forgot to actually use the strong or agile attacks. So I would be reminded when I came up against a trainer or one of the stronger Pokemon to use them. Sometimes, like I guess towards the end of the game, I was using more strong attacks in the to be like, okay, I just want to get through Pokemon as quickly as possible, so I want to do as much damage as possible and just one hit everything. And then I was also using the agile attack a little bit later on to catch Pokemon. So if I was at a stage where, you know, maybe my team was like 20 levels higher than the Pokemon of the region that I was currently in, and I wanted to catch something, I would use the agile attacks to do less damage in the hope that I wouldn't kill a Pokemon in one hit, and then I could catch it. But otherwise, there wasn't really like a level of strategy within the actual game itself or in the battles themselves where I felt like I needed to use them. However, I did think it was quite cool that they had this idea of Pokemon mastering their attacks. Like I said, I don't think it was pulled off the best way with the strong and agile moves. Like I feel like it could have been a bit more like I like how RPG of a mechanic it was, but like that you get stronger by doing. So it would have been maybe cool if they had been like, okay, you start off with Water Gun with a water Pokemon, and then when you use Water Gun 10 times, that then turns into Bubble Beam, which is like a slightly better version of Water Gun. And then as you use that another 20 times, it goes into Hydro Pump, and as you use Hydro Pump, it becomes something else. I think that would have been a bit cooler, because then you really feel like you are leveling up these moves to improve. So maybe that's something that will, you know, maybe be added to the later games. I'm not sure. But yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of the strong or agile attacks. That being said, though, even though there weren't that many trainer battles or battles in general, I did find this game to be one of the harder Pokemon games I've played, and I think this is down to three reasons. Number one is the aim of the game is to actually catch Pokemon rather than defeat them. So if you're in a Pokemon battle where you want to catch a wild Pokemon, you're purposefully not doing attacks that do too much damage so that you do not defeat the Pokemon. Whereas the enemy Pokemon that you're trying to catch is trying to do as much damage as possible to you in that battle. So it means that sometimes you might be trying to catch a certain Pokemon, and it will knock out 3 or 4 of your Pokemon because you're trying to not kill it, and you might not be getting lucky with the Pokeball throws, and you might not be catching them. So yeah, there was a lot of times where I was trying to catch Pokemon, and most of my team was dead because I just let the enemy Pokemon keep on attacking me and until I caught it. And then this is sort of paired with the base camps in the game, which they act like the Pokemon centers of the game. and they're quite rare. Like in each region, there's probably 3 or 4 that you can find, and some of them you kind of unlock by doing side quests. But yeah, they act like the Pokemon centers where you can heal your Pokemon by sleeping or resting. You can buy items, and you can also swap out your Pokemon there. And in the early game, they are really not that convenient to get to, so you can fast travel to them. But if you were, so say you're on your way to fight the noble, or maybe you found an area on the map where there are a lot of cool Pokemon spawning, it's quite inconvenient to go to fast travel back to one and then make your way back to where you were, because the traversal early on isn't that good. This obviously changes later, because later on you can learn how to fly, and then it wasn't such a big deal. But what I found myself doing was that I would be, if there was like a Pokemon, a spawn point of a certain Pokemon, I'd stay there for as long as I could and catch as many as I could, so I could try and fill out the Pokedex, and then I would kind of crawl back to the base camp with like one Pokemon alive on 10 HP, which is usually not the case in other Pokemon games. And finally, number 3, in Pokemon battles with trainers, it's interesting because they've changed how XP is awarded. So now XP is only awarded at the end of the battle, whereas in, I think, all of the Pokemon games until this point, XP is usually awarded after a Pokemon is defeated. So if, say I'm using a Gyarados and I go up against a Golem, and my Gyarados beats the Golem, after the Golem is defeated, my Gyarados will get XP points as well as all of the other Pokemon in my party. But then if the next Pokemon that they throw out is an electric one and that kills my Gyarados, obviously then Gyarados doesn't get any XP when that enemy is killed. That's usually how it works. In this game, it's the opposite. So it could be that Gyarados if I'm up against an opponent with 6 Pokemon, Gyarados kills 5 of them and then dies to the 6th one. At the end of the battle, he won't get any XP points. So I think that's also kind of skewed the battling a little bit, where you can't, like, if you're trying to train up a certain Pokemon, you have to make sure that it stays alive throughout the entire fight. Otherwise, you don't get any XP, which is something a bit different, and there's something a bit. It's a little bit weird, I thought. I don't know why they did that. But nevertheless, I did like the extra challenge, but it does become a little bit annoying towards the end of the game if you are focusing on catching Pokemon, because you have to go back and forth to the base camp to heal all the time. It made sort of like the last 5 hours of the game drag a little bit, because I was trying to finish the game, but I kept getting slowed down by trying to catch as many Pokemon as I could, because as I said before, I thought I needed to get my trainer level to level 10, which ended up not being the case. And as I said before, there is crafting in the game, and you can craft like potions and revives and Pokeballs, Great Balls, Ultra Balls. But I think I misjudged how important crafting is in the game, especially early on. So like the first 10 hours, I would see the ingredients laid on the ground or in a tree or wherever, and would just kind of pass them by, because I was like, I'm not going to craft. I'm just going to buy everything I can when I need it, as you tend to do in regular Pokemon games. But it was only towards like the latter half of the game where I realized, when the game starts getting more difficult, that I realized, I should have collected those materials to craft potions so that I can survive out in the wild longer. Because in Jubilife City, you can pretty much buy anything you need, but in the base camp, it is very limited on what you can buy. So especially like Pokeballs, you can't buy Great Balls or Ultra Balls there. You have to craft them. And if you haven't been collecting the acorns and the Tumblestone and the iron ore, specifically the iron ore is really hard to get a lot of. You need to you can't craft Great Balls and Ultra Balls, and you can't buy them. So yeah, I would say if you are starting out and you're kind of listening to this podcast beforehand, make sure you pick up everything you see, because it will help you out later. And going on a little bit more about the world, Pokemon Legends Arceus, it isn't the sprawling open world as Pokemon fans had dreamed of, but I am really impressed by how large the open world areas are in the game. In total, there are 6 regions. There is the Obsidian Grasslands, the Red Swamplands, Cobalt Coastlands, Crater Mountain Highlands, the White Frostlands, and the Ancient Settlement. And as you kind of go between them, you return to the central hub of Jubilife Village to restock and get missions. And it's also quite interesting in the world that there are a lot of missions, a lot of side quests, where when I first started out, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do all of these and keep on top of them. You can't. There are so many of them. And to be honest, there are a lot of just fetch quests where the reward isn't really worth it. So after doing a couple, I was like, okay, I'm not going to bother chasing these anymore. There are some, like there's one in Jubilife City, there's like a kind of farming area where if you do the side quests there, you will get more space to farm, and then you can harvest more crops, which is quite cool. And there are some other ones in the village too where you get rewards from like the tailor. I think she unlocks, if you do hers, she unlocks new outfits that you can wear, which is also something that's cool about this game, that you can kind of put new outfits on and change your dress all the time. So some are worth doing, but most of them just give you items like potions or XP or whatever, which are handy but not necessarily worth the hassle of going to do them. But anyway, each of the regions feels very very varied, and they have, you know, their own kind of unique Pokemon that can only be caught in those regions. As you can probably guess from the names, like the grasslands is a grassy area, swamplands is kind of a wet, boggy area, coastlands is mostly like beach and ocean, the highlands are mountains, frostlands are like it's a snowy area, and the ancient settlement is like this kind of ruined area. So they aren't like nothing, the biomes aren't like mind-blowing, they aren't like completely out of left field and unique in a sense of you've never seen a biome like this, but I imagine that they are based or inspired by real places on Hokkaido, so that's probably why they are based a bit more in reality. And the one thing I love about this game, and I think is kind of the one revolutionary part of this game, is how you get around in it, like how you traverse in it, I should say. Because there are no more HMs in the game. Instead, you get to win over other nobles of Hisui who have not become frenzied. And when you do win these nobles over, you get to ride them and can use them to gallop, swim, and fly all over Hisui. And it felt really, really cool to be able to ride these Pokemon, and switching between them is so seamless. So it would be like you could ride or maybe like jump off of a cliff with a Pokemon called Wydeer, which is like the evolution of Stantlia. And you use him kind of like a horse, basically. And you would jump off a cliff and then land in a river, and then you would instantly start swimming with Bakulegion or Backlegion, which is the kind of evolution of the Bass type Pokemon, but I can't remember its name. But anyway, you land in the water, you instantly change to him, and then you can swim with him. And then with him, you can do like a double jump, and you double jump onto a cliff face and switch to a Pokemon called Sneasler, which will then grab on, and it sort of looks like Sneasel, but imagine it has like massive Wolverine claws that it uses to scale cliff faces. And then you climb to the top of the mountain with Sneasler, and then can jump into the air and fly with Bravery, which is like a massive eagle that is, you're kind of underneath. It's like holding on to you a bit like a paraglider. And it just feels also seamless. And it's so cool because in a lot of open world games, traversal can really bog you down. Like if you've ever played Skyrim, you know, trying to get up a mountain and like bunny hopping or zigzagging on a horse all the way up and down the mountain, it really slows you down. Or even in Breath of the Wild, like Breath of the Wild also feels very fluid. But when you're climbing a mountain, there is stamina, so you do get kind of hindered on how far you can go with the stamina in the game. Whereas this game, it's not like that. It's really just like you can just run, jump, fly, swim wherever you want to go, and everything just feels so fluid and fast. And I'm really happy to see that this was something that Pokemon obviously saw as being something good for the game, and that they added it into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, because they also did that there with the legendary Pokemon. So yeah, I hope this is something that they continue to do going forward in the future. And not just the traversal was a good thing. Another good thing that I was quite surprised about was how good the game looks, because after seeing the announcement video back in 2021 and then playing Scarlet last year, I assumed Arceus was also going to be kind of ugly and run poorly. But I'm really happy to say that it actually looks quite nice. It's not as pretty as some of the other games that were released that year on the Switch. So like if you compare it to other Switch releases of 2022, you might be like, yeah, okay, it still looks a bit basic. But when you compare it to other Pokemon games, I was quite impressed. Like the Pokemon have animations that make them feel, in quotation marks, more realistic than I was expecting. They will sleep, they'll eat, they'll interact with each other out in the wild. And even like Pokemon like Abra that, you know, they float around and they use teleport all the time, will actually teleport around the map rather than walking or just not moving at all. So there's these like little bits of extra detail that just make this game feel way more polished than Pokemon Scarlet did. And the sprites and models themselves also seem to be a big improvement, especially on the games that came before, with less Pokemon having like dead-eyed stares and just no animation or emotion at all in their facial animations. And They instead now like seem to react to things that are happening around them, which gives them like a little bit more of a feeling that they're actually in this world and existing in this world, and not just kind of standing there in like almost like a T pose and waiting to be caught. And what's cool is that the same can be said for your character. So their animations aren't amazing compared to other games, but there are at least some facial animations and emotions and even cutscenes. Like the cutscenes in this game are pretty good for a Pokemon game, and I wasn't really expecting cutscenes in the scope that they have them, but was really pleasantly surprised that they were in there. And like a lot of them are just reused. Like whenever you beat a noble, you get more or less the same cutscene afterwards, but they look pretty. They feel way more sort of polished, and I don't know, I don't know if they're made with ink, like done in engine. Like I think they're all pre-rendered cutscenes as well, so it just again gives them like a little bit of a higher polish. So it's just something that again I wasn't really expecting in a Pokemon game, especially after playing Scarlet. Even though Scarlet does have cutscenes as well, but their cutscenes weren't great. But these in this one they're really nice. In addition, I really like the design of the UI. Like everything looks as if it had been written with a brush and parchment. So if you imagine, like, you know, how they write kanji back in the olden day with this brush and this black ink on kind of this brownish paper, that's how the UI feels. And it has a lot of traditional sort of, like we said before about Arcanine's fur kind of looking like how traditional Japanese artists drew clouds. That's sort of how the UI is designed too. Especially when a Pokemon evolves, like it's a really cool animation now where there is like this whirlwind that goes around them that again is made of this kind of traditional looking wind, and it's all black, and it kind of looks almost as if like an artist is quickly drawing in the Pokemon. Like it's a really, really cool look. Again, just something completely different to what we've seen in Pokemon before, but just a lot of like nice detail and just makes this game again just feel a lot more polished. And yeah, like as I've already said, compared to Scarlet, this game looks way better. I was wrong to assume it looked bad based off of the videos that it released with back in 2021. But there is a caveat that I did play this game in handheld mode on my Switch Lite, whereas Scarlet I played docked on my OG Switch on a 65-inch TV. Therefore, the blemishes of Scarlet might have been enhanced by the big screen, whereas on a smaller screen you might not see them. So there is that, but at least playing handheld on a Nintendo Switch Lite, the game did look really, really pretty. But the question remains, should you play Pokémon Legends Arceus? And all in all, I really enjoyed my time with Pokémon Legends Arceus. It is an interesting spin on the Pokemon formula, and setting it in the founding days of the Sinnoh region was a great idea. Its story is interesting as you play as a kind of fish out of water thrown into the rugged land of Hisui, where Pokemon are not yet the friendly and lovable characters we know them as today. The game has a lot of unexpected highs like bullet hell boss battles, amazing traversal through the semi-open world, cool remixed Pokemon designs, and it not looking or running as bad as I assumed it would after playing Pokemon Scarlet. I still prefer Pokemon Scarlet to Arceus because I love the true open world of that game and the freedom it gives you to sort of approach its three main story quests. However, there is no denying that Pokemon Legends Arceus is the better game. It looks better, runs better, is way more innovative, and has a better story and writing. So yeah, that was my review of Pokemon Legends Arceus. I think it is a game that if you're a Pokemon fan, you should definitely try out. And if, I don't know, maybe you're a kind of Pokemon fan from the past and sort of put the series down because it felt very stagnant, and maybe you're interested in getting back into it. And I would say this is a very good sort of stepping stone game back into modern Pokemon, because it's it is different. Like it feels different. Like it feels like something new, which Pokemon hasn't really done for a while. I guess the last thing that they really tried was Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and that felt too sort of like kids first Pokemon. Whereas this doesn't. This feels like there is some challenge in there. There is some RPG elements. There is some open world elements. It looks good, and and there's a new one coming out. So hopefully the new one Z-A can improve on what we have here. I really, really hope the game runs better than, like, even better than this one, and certainly better than Pokemon Scarlet, and looks like a level above this too. Like I hope they just didn't take this sort of this engine and this world and the assets and just reuse them, because it looks fine. Pokemon Legends Arceus looks fine, but again, compared to all of the other games that are releasing this year, if Legends Z-A comes out looking like this again, it's just going to look outdated and old right from the start, which will be a shame. And yeah, I'm kind of interested to hear what you guys think Pokemon Legends Z-A will be. I think it's going to be set in the future in Luminos City, because with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, you know, there is the aspects of time there as well, where one, your Pokemon from the past are appearing in the present, and in the other game, Pokemon from the future appearing in the present. And because Arceus is set in the past, I think Z-A might be set in the future, which would be an interesting spin. And I think Pokemon Z-A is mostly going to be set in Luminos City. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how you play an open world Pokemon game in a sprawling city. Be really cool. Hopefully we find out on Pokemon Day. I'm recording on the 23rd, so I think Pokemon Day is on the presentation is on the 25th. So within a couple of days, or actually I think the day before this podcast goes out, we should hopefully know. So if you are finding the podcast because you're looking for Pokemon content around Pokemon Day, welcome. I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, there are some other Pokemon podcasts in the feed where I looked at Scarlet. I've also looked at Pokemon White. I do plan later on this year to do a Pokemon White 2 playthrough. So there will be, of course, an episode about that. And as a reminder, guys, I just want to thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please make sure you leave us a 5-star review, because reviews help new people find us. And if you really enjoyed, then please consider subscribing to the podcast on Patreon. Like I said, I posted our first bonus episode last week about my top 10 Nintendo games on the Nintendo Switch. And the plan is to post at least one episode every month with lots of different topics through kind of the gaming sphere. Some kind of like opinion topics, more kind of top 10 lists, things like that. And also I'm taking suggestions from patrons too about stuff that they want to hear. So yeah, if you do decide to sign up and you have some ideas about podcasts you'd like me to make, then let me know over on Patreon. Or you can also let me know in the Beat Your Backlog Discord server. The link to it is down in the description. So again, guys, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.